told you that trying to get healthy by pushing through a strict multi-day water fast might actually unleash a dangerous flood of banned 1970s industrial chemicals right into your bloodstream?
I mean, it just completely shatters the conventional wisdom around fasting and detoxing, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive into the architecture of longevity, metabolic and behavioral blueprints. If you are a learner who is constantly bombarded and honestly just overwhelmed by the endless wellness trends out there, consider this your master blueprint.
Right, because we are tearing down everything you think you know about longevity. We've got a massive stack of research today.
Oh yeah, we are covering everything from cellular cleanup and psychiatric keto diets to breathing techniques, gut health, endocrine disruptors, and even the literal science of human connection.
And as I look at this glowing, interactive metabolic blueprint we've got projected on the screens behind us, the mission for today's deep dive is incredibly clear. This isn't just about survival.
Right. It's about completely redesigning the structural foundation of how your brain, your body, and your social life actually operate.
Exactly. Because the goal is to actually enjoy those extra years you're fighting for.
Spot on. We're going to build this house from the foundation up, together with zero jargon. And to pour that foundation, we really have to start at the cellular level.
We do, and the sources highlight the work of nutritional biochemist Dr. Paul Arciero. He proposes a system combining protein pacing with something he calls intermittent nutritional fasting.
Okay, before we get to the fasting part, can you explain the protein pacing? Like, how is that different from just eating a standard high-protein diet?
So it's all about the timing and the dose. Protein pacing dictates that you consume 25 to 40 grams of high-quality protein every 4 hours throughout the day for 5 to 6 days a week.
Got it. So it's not just, slamming a giant steak at dinner.
Right. No, it isn't just about building muscle. It fundamentally changes your metabolism. When you dose protein this specifically, the data shows it drastically increases your body's thermogenic response.
And that's the amount of energy your body burns just to digest and process the food, right?
Exactly. And it increases that response by nearly 100%.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this. So for 5 or 6 days a week, we are just stoking the metabolic fire. But what happens on those other 1 or 2 days?
Well, the sources call it a nutritional fast, which sounds like an oxymoron, I know.
Yeah, totally. Because if you're fasting, shouldn't you just be drinking water?
That is exactly the trap most people fall into. When you do a strict water fast, your body enters a state of autophagy,
Yeah.
literally self-eating.
Right, the cellular cleanup.
Exactly. It's a critical cleanup mechanism where your body scavenges for dead or damaged cells to use for energy.
Yeah.
And to fuel this, your body starts mobilizing your deep stores of visceral fat.
Well, which sounds like exactly what we want, right? Like we want to burn that deep belly fat.
We do. But what's fascinating here is why breaking down that fat can actually be dangerous if you aren't prepared.
Yeah.
Your body uses deep visceral fat as a biological safe storage locker for environmental toxins that it just doesn't know how to process.
Wait, hold on. So by trying to get healthy and burn fat, I might actually be poisoning my own system?
Potentially, yeah. Dr. Arciero conducted a highly sophisticated study in 2014 tracking 19 different highly toxic PCB congeners.
And those are those nasty industrial chemicals that were banned back in the 1970s, right?
Yes, exactly. But because they don't break down easily in the environment, they're still hanging around, and they get stored inside human fat tissue.
Oh, man.
So when you do a strict water fast and rapidly burn that visceral fat, those 19 PCB toxins don't just vanish. They flood directly out of the fat cells and into your bloodstream.
That is absolutely terrifying. You're basically unleashing a chemical spill inside your own veins.
Pretty much, yeah.
So how does a nutritional fast actually fix this?
Well, instead of eating 0 calories on your fasting days, you consume 300 to 500 calories of highly structured, adaptogen, and antioxidant-rich supplements spaced throughout the day.
Okay, so if traditional fasting is like turning off the factory completely, this nutritional fast sounds like bringing in a specialized hazmat cleanup crew while the factory is on low power.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. When those toxins flood the system during the fat-burning process, those specific antioxidant supplements act as a biochemical shield.
Oh, so they bind to the toxins.
Exactly. They bind to and neutralize the toxins so your body can safely excrete them. In our Arciero's study, instead of the subjects experiencing a dangerous spike in oxidative stress from the toxins, their cellular stress levels actually plummeted.
Because they safely vacuumed out those deep tissue environmental toxins that would otherwise accelerate cellular aging.
Precisely. And the results went way beyond just detoxing.
Yeah, I saw in the notes that their body composition changed too. What happened there?
It was remarkable. The subjects who combined this specific nutritional fasting with the protein pacing saw a 9% increase in the proportion of their lean body mass.
A 9% increase.
Yes, and the kicker, that was independent of any exercise routine. They fundamentally changed their biological foundation just by pacing their protein and safely taking out the cellular trash.
That is wild. Okay, so we've talked about clearing toxic waste out of deep visceral fat, but there is an organ in your body that is made almost entirely of fat, which makes it highly vulnerable to these exact types of metabolic breakdowns.
The brain.
The brain. And this leads us into the work of Harvard psychiatrist Dr. Chris Palmer. He's using ketogenic diets to treat persistent psychiatric symptoms.
He is, and it's groundbreaking stuff.
Though I have to play devil's advocate for a second here. I'm highly skeptical. Isn't keto just that fad diet people use to drop 10 pounds before a beach vacation?
I completely understand the skepticism.
Like, how on earth is eating a bunch of fats treating severe psychiatric conditions?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to completely reframe how we view mental illness. Dr. Palmer's research, and a rapidly growing consensus in neuroscience, posits that mental health disorders, from severe depression to schizophrenia, are increasingly understood as metabolic dysfunctions of the brain itself.
So it's not just a chemical imbalance in the traditional sense. You're saying the brain's literal engine is broken.
Exactly. The brain is a massive energy hog. I mean, it consumes about 20% of your body's entire energy.
Right.
So in many psychiatric conditions, specific areas of the brain become insulin resistant. They literally cannot process glucose, which is their primary fuel source, effectively.
Wow. So the mitochondria, like the power plants of the cells, they just become defective.
Yes, the brain is effectively starving and sputtering, which causes neurotransmitters to misfire.
And how does a ketogenic diet fix a sputtering brain engine?
When you implement a well-formulated ketogenic diet, and this can be omnivore, vegetarian, or vegan, by the way, it just has to be very low carbohydrate and high fat. You are tricking the brain into thinking it is in a fasting state. Because there is no glucose available, the liver starts converting fat into molecules called ketone bodies.
And these ketones cross the blood-brain barrier.
They do. And more importantly, ketones act as a premium alternative fuel source that completely bypasses the broken glucose pathways.
That makes so much sense.
They literally force the defective mitochondria to repair themselves and multiply. It stabilizes the electrical activity in the entire brain.
And this isn't just a fringe theory either. Can you walk us through the scale of the data here?
It is heavily supported. The sources highlight that this approach is backed by over 50 published studies, with 20 ongoing controlled trials tracking over 1,900 patients.
That is a lot of data.
It really is. And historically, this makes perfect sense. The ketogenic diet wasn't invented as a weight loss fad. It was developed a century ago at the Mayo Clinic as a gold standard, evidence-based treatment for drug-resistant childhood epilepsy.
Wait, really? A century ago?
Yes, it stops seizures by stabilizing the brain's energy metabolism. Now, researchers are using that exact same metabolic stabilization to treat severe anxiety, brain fog, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia.
The case studies in the notes are just staggering. Dr. Palmer works with patients who have suffered from crippling treatment-resistant schizophrenia for decades.
Decades, yeah.
And by strictly shifting their brain's fuel source to ketones, many achieve full remission. Some even taper completely off their heavy psychiatric medications.
It is incredible to see.
But there's a heavy emotional component to this, right? The sources mentioned a grieving phase that I just found incredibly profound.
It is probably the most human element of this entire clinical blueprint. Dr. Palmer notes that when his patients finally achieve this dietary remission and their minds clear for the first time in years, they don't immediately celebrate.
Which you would think they would, right?
You would, but they often go through a profound, devastating grieving phase instead. They grieve for the decades of life they lost, the careers they couldn't have, the relationships that fell apart.
All simply because their brain had the wrong fuel source and no one knew how to fix it.
Exactly. It's a huge emotional toll.
It is heartbreaking, but I guess it also proves we have so much more agency over our cognitive lifespan than we ever thought. So we've fueled the brain with premium ketones, and we've cleaned the cellular trash out of our fat stores.
Right.
But what happens when we put this newly renovated machine under intense physical stress? How do we burn that fuel without breaking the engine?
Well, to prevent the engine from breaking down under stress, we need a mechanical governor.
Which brings us to Nasima Inyang. He's an elite powerlifter and a Brazilian jiu-jitsu world champion, and his entire endurance philosophy revolves around a strict nasal breathing governor for cardiovascular training.
Yes, it is.
My body is screaming for oxygen.
Right.
So how does restricting my airway by forcing myself to breathe only through my nose actually give my tissues more oxygen? That sounds completely backward.
It seems counterintuitive, absolutely. But it all comes down to a physiological mechanism known as the Bohr effect. When you breathe through your mouth, you are taking in a lot of air, yes, but you are also rapidly blowing off carbon dioxide.
But CO2 is just a toxic waste gas, right? Like we want to blow it off.
That is the big misconception.
Hmm.
We actually need a certain level of CO2 in our bloodstream because CO2 is the exact trigger that tells your red blood cells to release their oxygen into your muscles and organs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you overbreathe through your mouth and blow off all your CO2, the oxygen stays tightly bound to your hemoglobin.
So wait, you're saying I could be breathing super heavy, like panting?
You could have a bloodstream completely saturated with oxygen, but your muscles are literally suffocating because the oxygen won't detach.
Wow. Okay, so how does nasal breathing fix that?
When nasal breathing creates resistance, it naturally warms, humidifies, and slows the air down, drawing it much deeper into the lower lobes of the lungs where oxygen exchange is most efficient.
Making every breath count for more.
Exactly. And crucially, because you are breathing slower, you retain more carbon dioxide. You build a massive CO2 tolerance.
And that retained CO2 forces the oxygen to unbind and flood into your tissues.
Yes. Plus, nasal breathing triggers the release of nitric oxide in the nasal cavity, which powerfully dilates your blood vessels.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It is exactly like putting a speed governor on a golf cart, so the engine literally cannot blow out, no matter how hard you press the pedal.
That is exactly how Nasima Yang uses it. The rule is simple but brutal. You strictly limit your aerobic intensity to a level where you can breathe exclusively through your nose.
And if you break the rule,
If you have to open your mouth to gasp for air, you must lower the intensity immediately.
the notes detail his self-experiment on the assault bike. When he first started, stubbornly keeping his mouth shut, his maximum output was a very modest 150 to 160 watts.
But he stayed disciplined. He forced his body to adapt to the governor.
And a year later, his body transformed mechanically. He could sustain an elite 330 watts for 20 minutes purely through nasal breathing.
That's a massive jump.
And when he took that expanded aerobic base into jiu-jitsu, he was effortlessly calm, recovering between rounds while his open-mouth breathing opponents were heavily panting and completely gassed out.
He achieved that because he trained his nervous system to remain in a parasympathetic state. That's your rest, digest, and recover state.
Right.
He stayed in that calm state during a highly sympathetic, incredibly stressful fight-or-flight activity. Studies on elite cyclists confirm this too.
Oh, really?
Yes, cyclists with identical VO2 maxes were compared, and the ones who utilized nasal breathing to build a broader aerobic floor, their lactate threshold, could endure high-intensity workouts for double the amount of time compared to their open-mouth breathing peers.
Okay, so nasal breathing acts as an incredible mechanical filter for our air, and it protects us from internal stress. But what about the invisible environment? Like, we're filtering our air, but what are we passively absorbing daily through our gut and our skin that we aren't even aware of?
This is where we have to examine the gut-environment interface.
Yeah.
You can be doing the workouts and the fasting, but if you ignore what you are absorbing, the architecture will still completely collapse.
And pit it against the stark warnings from Dr. Gabriel Leon about EDCs, or endocrine-disrupting chemicals. Let's start with the good inputs first.
Sounds like a plan.
Dr. Shaw's rule is a simple daily action. 30 grams of protein at your first meal, 30 grams of diverse fiber throughout the day, and 3 probiotic or fermented foods daily. We hear about fiber all the time, but what is the actual mechanism? Why is it so magical for longevity?
What's fascinating here is that you don't actually digest fiber.
Wait, we don't.
No, your gut bacteria do.
Wait.
When you feed your microbiome diverse plant fibers, those bacteria ferment it and produce byproducts called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs.
Okay, and what do those do?
These SCFAs are biological magic. They essentially act like systemic ibuprofen. They cross the gut barrier, enter the bloodstream, and actively travel around your body, turning off inflammatory gene expressions.
So you are literally farming your own anti-inflammatory medicine inside your gut.
Precisely. and it takes very little to see massive results. The sources show that adding just 5 to 7 grams of fiber daily, which is literally 1 tablespoon of chia seeds or a small serving of raspberries, can reduce your all-cause mortality by 10%.
Wow, and I love that this is entirely in your control. The sources cite identical twin studies proving that twins separated at birth develop completely distinct microbiomes.
Yep, your daily lifestyle inputs dictate your gut health, not your genetics.
But Dr. Shaw also recommends something called a Nature Walk probiotic. How can just standing in sunlight act as a probiotic?
It all comes down to circadian biology. The trillions of bacteria in your gut possess their own biological
Oh,
clocks.
no way, the bacteria have clocks.
They do. When sunlight hits your eyes and your skin, it sends signals to the microbiome to synchronize their metabolic processes with the time of day. This optimizes how they produce hormones and communicate with your brain.
And that communication is a two-way street, right?
It's actually a heavily one-sided street. The gut and the brain are physically linked by the vagus nerve, which contains about 600 million neurons.
That's a lot of traffic.
But 90% of the traffic on that neural highway travels up from the gut to the brain, not the other way around.
Which perfectly explains the clinical outcomes Dr. Shaw is seeing. She treats women suffering from extreme perimenopause symptoms like crippling brain fog, mood swings. And by shifting them to a high-fiber diet and enforcing morning sunlight to sync their gut clocks, she sees their microbiomes alter so dramatically that their severe cognitive symptoms often resolve entirely within 48 to 72 hours.
That is the incredible power of positive environmental inputs.
It really is.
Yeah.
But we have to talk about the bad inputs now.
Yes, this raises an important question. What happens when our modern environment is actively sabotaging that exact same biology?
Enter Dr. Gabrielle Leon and endocrine-disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. We are talking about chemicals like BPA, PFAS, and atrazine. What do these chemicals actually do once they get inside our bodies?
The sources describe these EDCs as acting like a fake key broken off inside a lock.
A fake key.
Yeah, so your hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and thyroid hormones are the real keys that unlock specific cellular functions. EDCs are molecularly shaped just similarly enough to your natural hormones that they can fit into your cell's receptors.
Uh-oh.
But once they are in, they either block the real hormones from working or they completely hijack the system and trigger wild, unintended responses.
Can you give me an example of the hijacking?
Take atrazine, a tremendously common agricultural herbicide used on crops. When it enters the human body, it artificially upregulates an enzyme called aromatase.
Yeah.
And aromatase's job is to convert testosterone into estrogen.
Wait, so this chemical is actively draining testosterone and replacing it with estrogen?
Yes. A massive systematic review from Baylor College of Medicine looked at over 200,000 men.
That is a huge study.
It is. And it definitively confirmed that the progressive generational decline in testosterone we are seeing in men as they age isn't just natural aging. It is heavily exacerbated by constant daily exposure to these exact environmental toxins.
I want to bring you, the listener, into this for a second. Think about your routine today. Did you use some alcohol-based hand sanitizer at the grocery store right before the cashier handed you your receipt?
That is one of the most dangerous invisible exposures.
Because of the receipt paper.
Exactly. Thermal grocery store receipts are heavily coated in unbound BPA. When you use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer, it breaks down the natural lipid barrier of your skin.
Oh, so it just opens the floodgates.
Yes. If you handle one of those thermal receipts immediately after sanitizing your hands, it increases your skin's absorption of that toxic BPA by up to 100-fold.
100-fold, it just goes straight into the bloodstream.
Right.
And it's not just the grocery store, it's the gym, too. The sources note that Dr. Lyon frequently treats 30-year-old men suffering from unexplained fatigue, erectile dysfunction, and rapid muscle loss.
And they are baffled because they train incredibly hard and eat perfectly.
Exactly. So why is their system crashing?
Because they are working out in PFAS-laden synthetic water-resistant athletic wear.
The forever chemicals.
Yes. When you do an intense HIIT workout in synthetic gear, your body temperature rises and your pores open wide. The sweat acts as a solvent, leaching those forever chemicals directly out of the synthetic fabric into your open pores and straight into your endocrine system.
It is the ultimate contradiction of modern health. You could be doing the nutritional fasting, pacing your protein, eating your fiber, breathing perfectly through your nose. But if you're covered in synthetic gym gear and constantly sanitizing your hands before grabbing a receipt, your environment is actively collapsing your house from the outside in.
It is wild.
We have to aggressively filter our tap water, use glass instead of plastic, avoid fragrance-heavy cosmetics, and just ditch the synthetic workout clothes for natural fibers.
It really is a non-negotiable defense of your biology. Long-term, eliminating these EDCs prevents environmentally driven metabolic syndrome and protects the brain from the severe neurological risks of long-term hormone deprivation.
Okay, so let's take a step back. We've optimized the cellular cleanup. We've repaired the brain's engine with ketones.
Check.
We've governed our breathing to manage physical stress. We've fed our gut and fiercely defended our environment from invisible toxins. We have built an incredible physical house.
We have.
But the science says if you stop there, if you just focus on your own physical biology, you are missing the single most structural, load-bearing pillar of longevity.
Because the ultimate longevity buffer isn't a chemical or a breathing technique, it is human connection.
Right. We turn to behavioral scientist Keith Ferrazzi and his concept of co-elevating relationships, which the sources pair directly with the famous 87-year Harvard study of adult development.
This is the longest-running study on human health in history.
And what was their ultimate definitive conclusion?
The finding that shocked researchers was that the quality of your close relationships at age 50 is the absolute #1 predictor of your physical health at age 80.
It outperformed cholesterol levels?
It outperformed cholesterol, it outperformed genetics, IQ, resting heart rate, and wealth. The data is unequivocally clear. Authentic human connection is a biological imperative for survival.
So what does this actually mean in practice? Ferrazzi offers a clear action plan for this, centered around defining a social contract.
Right.
He suggests creating a small, dedicated peer group, like a monthly dinner with a few couples, where you intentionally bypass the superficial small talk.
You have to get to the real stuff.
Exactly. You look them in the eye and ask exactly what is draining their energy right now and what their specific terrifying goals are. And then you proactively offer tangible resources to help them succeed.
A social contract isn't just grabbing a beer and complaining about your boss.
No, it's essentially recruiting an emotional spotter for the heavy lifting of life. But how does this translate biologically? Like, how does having a deep conversation stop a heart attack 20 years later?
It all comes back to the nervous system. When you carry the heavy burdens of life entirely on your own, your body perceives that isolation as a constant, low-grade threat.
Okay.
You stay locked in a sympathetic fight-or-flight state, pumping out cortisol, which causes systemic inflammation. And that's the root of nearly all chronic disease.
Wow.
But when you engage in authentic connection and shared vulnerability, it triggers a biological process called co-regulation.
Co-regulation.
Yes, moving resilience from being an individual burden to a shared responsibility physically signals your nervous system to shift into a calm parasympathetic state. You drastically reduce that chronic disease-causing inflammation.
Ferrazzi's own co-elevation group is the perfect case study of this biological safety net. 3 couples committing to monthly dinners. Over several years, they systematically shared their deepest personal and professional vulnerabilities, allowing the group to pepper them with hard questions and offer direct, unflinching support.
And that structured accountability literally helped those couples successfully navigate marital infidelity, severe life-threatening health issues, and massive career struggles.
It acted as a literal load-bearing safety net for their well-being.
It is the single most scientifically validated factor for extending your health span. Without it, the rest of the physical blueprint eventually crumbles under the weight of isolated stress.
So what does this all mean for you? Let's look at the master blueprint we've drawn up today.
Let's do it.
You build the foundation by pacing your protein and using a nutritional fast to safely extract deep tissue toxins without poisoning your own bloodstream. You switch your brain's fuel to ketones to repair mitochondria and stabilize your mood. You govern your physical stress by strictly breathing through your nose to build CO2 tolerance and force oxygen into your tissues.
You feed your gut microbiome with fiber and morning sunlight, while aggressively defending your skin and hormones from invisible toxic chemicals.
And finally, you build a load-bearing social safety net by co-elevating with a trusted peer group.
If you successfully apply this architecture, the science suggests you might gain an extra decade or 2 of highly functional, disease-free life.
Which is the goal.
It is. But that leaves you with an entirely new challenge to ponder tonight. If you are given 20 bonus years of peak physical and mental energy, what entirely new purpose or second act will you dedicate them to that you haven't even allowed yourself to dream of yet?
That is the ultimate question. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Now it's time for you to take these blueprints and start building your own house from the foundation up. See you next time.